So first of all, let me welcome everyone. So excited that you're here joining us to hear Kelli Thompson today. We're going to be talking about the imposter monster or imposter complex. Kelli, I can't thank you enough. Excited just to death to have you here. So thank you for joining us and welcome.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here. Thank you for having me.
Oh, our pleasure, our pleasure. So if I can ask everyone just before I start the bio, just turn your videos off while we're doing the conversation. And keep your systems on mute. Once we get to the Q&A, I will ask you to turn off your videos and turn off your mute so that you can, participate and be interactive with us. We would love that. That's awesome. And so let me just take a moment and welcome our guest today. We have Kelli Thompson joining us all the way from Omaha, Nebraska. So Kelli, thrilled to have you here. And I'm going to share a little bit about your background before we get started. So Kelli is a leadership coach. She's a speaker. She's an author, speaks in lots of different venues, whether it's in written or oral feedback. But she also earned her MBA and has served as an adjunct faculty member at University of Nebraska. She is a thought leader where you can hear her on Thrive Global, Introvert Dear, HR Daily Advisor, amongst a few others that she has participated in. And prior to becoming a leadership coach, Kelli spent time in banking, finance, and healthcare tech. And we're thrilled that she's going to impart some of the experiences and wisdoms that she has learned through the years with us here today. As I mentioned, we'll take questions toward the end. And if something comes up, though, during a conversation, please use the chat. We want to make sure that we get all of your questions answered. And Kelli, again, welcome. Welcome to Women in Leadership Talk. Thrilled to have you here.
Oh, thank you so much. I'm thrilled to be here.
Awesome. Awesome. So your corporate career has led you to really better understand some of these challenges that women face. And, I know that you studied with I think it's Cy Wakeman. Am I saying that correctly? Okay. And we really want to tap into, some of that expertise you have with regards to imposter complex or imposter monster. I love that, actually, imposter monster, because it's a little monster that gets in our heads, right?
So true. Yeah. Yes.
Yeah. So we're thrilled to get to learn from you today. So let's start off and see what you feel has been really some of the biggest reasons that individuals get caught up in the imposter complex or they suffer from that.
Yeah. So I think we have to remember that the biggest reason that people feel imposter syndrome is that they're human. Like we all suffer from the human condition, and you use the term it's like a little monster in there. It's an imposter monster. Well, I almost like to think of it like, yeah, it's basically our ego. It's our little ego monster. It's this little thing that starts to form around age 7 or 8. We have this fear center in our brain, the amygdala, and the amygdala just doesn't really like change. It doesn't really like its comfort zone stretched. It doesn't really like new things. But the problem is like our amygdala just isn't smart enough. And sometimes our ego isn't even smart enough to know the difference between true danger, right? You're on a run. Oh my gosh, there's a badger that's coming across my path. I'm scared. And the fear that comes with exposure, like exposure of new groups, exposure of a promotion, exposure of new responsibilities. And so, when people say like, why do I feel imposter syndrome? I say, because you're human. And, we just have those parts of our brain. And in fact, some people ask me, is there such thing as like the opposite of imposter syndrome? And I say, yes, there is. And it's called the Dunning-Kruger effect. It's almost like when you have a sense of overconfidence, even though you don't have the necessary skills or experience. And so I think just to level set, in case imposter syndrome is something you're hearing for the first time, it is the belief that despite healthy qualifications, years of experience, that, when you get into that room and do your presentation, or, when you accept that promotion, that you'll be found out, and that everything you've earned so far is a result of luck, or that people are going to think, oh gosh, she's such a fraud. This is, when you speak up and open your mouth, you're going to be exposed for the fraud that you are. And so I think that's what I want people to know, is that you haven't done anything wrong. You're just human and you care about doing a good job. And we all have an ego that we struggle with that doesn't really like change, exposure, growing outside of comfort zones, all those sorts of things.
Okay. Yeah, that's awesome. And I love the example you gave there about, you know, the mechanism is there for protection, right? And so it's that awareness of recognizing, you know, if the badger or a lion or whatever, like that is important to have that. So, but it's recognizing when you need to kick that in, right? Which we're going to talk about today, when you need to kick that in versus when it is an imposter or when it's that ego kicking in to try to keep you small.
Exactly.
So super glad you brought that up. So let's talk about maybe what are some of the types of imposter complex that is experienced that you see, you know, most often?
Sure. So there's a lot of them and it's kind of sneaky on how it shows up. So when I hear women talk about imposter syndrome, it's oftentimes because they think they want to apply for a new job, but something's holding them back. They're thinking to themselves, gosh, I don't know if I'm really qualified. I'm looking at this job description. I've maybe only done 40 or 50% of these things, and I'm not sure if I have all the necessary skills and experience. Other types, so it can be like just self-doubt and self-doubt in a way like, and some people say, how do I know if I just have self-doubt or if it's imposter syndrome? I think we all have self-doubt because again, we're human. Unless you're a sociopath, maybe you don't have a lot of self-doubt, but you know, we have doubts. But imposter syndrome is the true, like almost disabling fear that will just cause people to check out. Like, you know, I'm just not going to apply. Or I'm so scared that I might have to speak up in a meeting and it's not going to go well. So I'm just not going to say anything at all. And I think that's the difference between doubt and imposter syndrome is imposter syndrome truly holds you back. It's truly a confidence and a career killer. So people do experience it as self-doubt. Sometimes they experience it as procrastination. I might be speaking for myself. But when I start to procrastinate a lot on things like maybe launching a new program or in corporate, procrastinating on sharing an idea with my supervisor, procrastinating on, any sort of moving a project forward or suggesting an idea that, maybe is new and out there, like that fancy procrastination is just imposter syndrome. And that's what I figured out is like, I'm just thinking if I just don't say anything, then I won't have to face the fear of imposter syndrome. So self-doubt, procrastination, worrying, anxiety, not applying for the jobs, not speaking up, not showing up, or going and being in the meeting and, just feeling the whole time like you don't belong there.
Yeah.
And so when you feel like you don't belong, you may not speak up. You may not say anything. A lot of your ideas that maybe somebody's counting on just go unheard. So, I mean, those are just a few of the things.
Yeah. And those are some great examples. Like I hear that quite often as well. One I want to tie back to though, that you brought up, which I find this one so interesting when we know we're qualified or we know that we should be up for that promotion and we look at the list as you pointed out and we're going, yeah, I can do 50%, even 60%, even 70%, and then we still will not put ourselves forward for that promotion, right? And it's looking at that and recognizing that if your colleague John over here, if he might have 40%, but he's still putting himself forward for it. Right. And so it's how do we overcome that and trust ourselves really to go for it? So I love that example. Thank you. Thank you so much. So what would be some of your suggestions for, just helping individuals, male or female, to overcome that imposter syndrome or conflict?
Yeah. So when I'm working with individuals or when I'm training this is a very common topic. I get requested to train. I tell people we really have to take a look at making changes and addressing this through our bodies, our heads, and our hearts. I think sometimes we just get into this place where oh, stop thinking that. Oh, stop thinking that. Oh, stop thinking that. And I don't know if you guys have ever noticed, but your brain is kind of like a toddler. And if you tell a toddler to stop doing it, what does a toddler do?
What?
Oh, they do it harder.
Exactly.
Yes. And so when I work with individuals to helping them overcome imposter syndrome, it really is, and I have this saying that today's goals become tomorrow's imposter syndrome. I don't know if y'all have ever noticed that, but like I sit down and I make goals and I'm so excited. And then when the day comes, I have to like execute on that goal. Like, let me give you a specific example. So public speaking. I'm speaking at a women's leadership conference in October. Okay. So excited to be in person again. And it's also going to be the first time that I've stepped up like on a stage in front of several hundred people in probably 2 years because of COVID. So I'm already, and there was a huge goal for me to start speaking in person at women's leadership conferences again, but I know. And so I want you all to think like, what's a goal that you have in the future? Just like I have this goal in the future. And even though it's today's goal, I know that when I get there about the day before, the week before, I'm going to be having some mad imposter syndrome. You know, what if I get up on stage and these women just think I am full of crap? What if I get up there and I can't remember anything I'm supposed to say? What if I get up there and they find out that all these things just, you know, don't make sense and I am just a fraud and I like this experience proves once and for all that I never should have been a speaker and I'm not qualified. I mean, all of these things are just normal. And so when we can plan for that, so that would be like my first tip is I want you to start thinking about what events or what goals do you have on your calendar that you know when you get to that day, you might be having some of those imposterish feelings. And, you know, make a plan for that. And I think lots of times we don't like realize we have imposter syndrome in our brains. It's not like a cognitive thing, especially in the beginning. We're not like, oh, this is imposter syndrome. Okay. I think what cripples us is we get to that day, and I'm just speaking from my own experience, and we can't stay out of the bathroom. Our stomachs are a mess. We can't eat. We get up and we have to share our idea, get up in the meeting room or get up on stage, and we are just sweating, right? Or we have splotchy neck. And I think a lot of times what happens is just this sense of worry and dread and anxiety. It actually shows up in our body first. And people notice it as body symptoms before it ever even occurs to them, oh my God, like this could be imposter syndrome, or this could be self-doubt. And so what I always say, you know, when you're thinking about even just calming down your body first, because it's your body that sends signals to your brain and not vice versa, is if you're somebody who kind of gets into like flight mode, right? So we, in our body responses, we have fight, flight, or freeze. And when you're feeling imposter syndrome, lots of times those systems are activated. And so if you're somebody who kind of gets in fight mode and gets really hot and has the splotchy neck, or if you're like me and you pit out every shirt, just to be honest, I mean, we're being real here, drink ice water. Ice water will actually just start to calm down like that fight response. That would be my first tip.
Okay.
I always have ice water before I have to give a big presentation. And in the video, I'm holding up my ice water right now. The second thing is to do box breathing. And box breathing is something that a lot of military personnel do to calm themselves down in high stakes situations. So box breathing is you just breathe out for 4 counts. You breathe in for 4 counts, you hold for 4 counts, you breathe out for 4 counts. And that slow breathing slows down that entire nervous system, all of that gunk that's going from your body and your anxiety up to your head. So those are 2 things that I love to do. Sometimes we have those folks who are freezers. They get in a room and they freeze and they don't know what to say. And so it's kind of the opposite of the ice water. Drink something warm to kind of like warm up the system. And so these are tips that I've gotten from neuroscientists and behavioral psychologists over the years that I personally use. Now I have to do the ice water and the breathing, but I do know people who bring a warm drink in because otherwise they're just freezers. So
that's awesome. That's awesome. So, and I love how you shared that, because, you know, having those little things that you can do because you know already. So what you shared there is you've got this event in October. You already know that you're going to escalate a bit, right? With some anxiety or with some imposter feelings. And so it is, how do we prepare for that? What about those people who, you know, super intelligent, have like, you know, they're awesome, they're amazing at what they do, but they are terrified. Again, it goes back to what you were saying earlier about they're afraid that new potential customers or clients or whatever will think they're a fraud, that they don't know. How do they prepare for that? Because it's not really, it is a goal, but it's now they're moving into a new venture. So how do they prepare and overcome the imposter syndrome?
Yes. So when you talk about very smart people, I have a dear friend, and she's kind of an entrepreneur colleague who's a neuroscientist. And so we're just going to go ahead and say she's a smart lady.
Okay.
And she used to be a teacher, and now she's an entrepreneur. And she sent me a message one day, a little video message. And she was the one who told me, she goes, my stomach is a wreck because, I have to go and, sell some of these things, and I have to go speak at this and, pitch my business and do all these things. And, I already shared some body stuff, but some of the things that her and I worked on, and it's really interesting because even she told me, she goes, Kelli, I should know this stuff. I know that our brains have a negativity bias, and just naturally we tend to think 75% of our thoughts are kind of negative every single day. And so we just used some of her own neuroscience. And that is, and in fact, Dr. Earl Miller, he's a neuroscientist out of MIT. We talked about him. And she said, you know what? Facts ease fear. So whenever even I get into this place of I'm really nervous about pitching this new program or making this tweak or offering up something new. And, we were talking with her even in the same situation where she was offering up something new. And even my clients who are career changers, walking into a brand new job that might be totally different than the one they've done, is let's look at the evidence. Let's look at the facts. And let's talk about other times in your life where you've done something new. And let's see how that turned out for you. And it's so important to keep evidence. I have a client who calls this her smile file. She goes, I just keep in my email, and some people have an app on their phone that does it, like examples of when I've done a great job, when I've gotten great feedback, when I had to launch something or do something that was really difficult, or just learn a whole new industry or a whole new way of being, and it worked out well for me. Because when we can look back at the evidence and say, you know what, this is just like the time where I left corporate and had to figure out how to be an entrepreneur. And this is what I did. And here's how I can use those skills again. I think sometimes we forget that our skills are transferable. So let's go back and look at the evidence. Let's see how we did it in the past, and what skills can we use to look forward into the future. And I would say the one final thing is, let's just think about what we're thinking about. So I said in the beginning that, my friend, the neuroscientist who we were having this some of conversation with, is we need to, that negativity bias, the 75% of our thoughts that are negative, like, let's think about what we're thinking about. So are the thoughts that we have in our head about this new entrepreneurship journey, this new program you're launching, this new career you could be transitioning to, are your thoughts expensive? And I always say an expensive thought costs you in your peace, your potential, and your paycheck. And expensive thoughts are like, I can't do this. I'm not smart enough. I'm not qualified. Who's going to want to hear me? I don't have anything to say. What if I fail? I can't do this right. What if I make mistakes, right? I mean, I think we all have trashy thoughts. So do you have expensive thoughts? And what is that expensive thought costing you? How is it impacting your results? Or what would be a more valuable thought? So when you look back on your smile file, your evidence, your facts, your experience, like, what do we know for sure? What's a more valuable thought? You know what? I'm qualified. I've done this before. When I change careers, it works out for me. People do want to hear my ideas, and because here is my proof. So think about what you're thinking about.
I love that. So you said a number of things there. I was trying to take some notes because I want to make sure I don't miss things. A number of things that you keyed into that I think are so important. But I'll go back to when you were describing your friend, the neuroscientist, right? We do know these things. And so it's like we have temporary memory loss,
Yes.
right? And so it's how do we know it psychologically, right? And it's how do we tap into that when things are let's say in full motion, right? And how do you pull that into you quickly to stabilize?
Yes,
That may
exactly.
not be a fair question, but that really struck out to me when you said that.
Yeah, no, that's a great question, because what happens is, like, when you're in that frenetic moment, that's where I want you to do the box breathing. So, because what happens is when you're in your fear brain, your amygdala, all this back here, like, you cannot be in your fear brain and your executive functioning at the same time.
Yes.
Okay, it's either or. With the ego, it's either or. And so all of a sudden you're back here freaking out. Oh my gosh, this is gonna be the time I'm found out and I'm a fraud and all the things, and I'm gonna, fail and then go be living in a van down by the river. But like, you have to be able to get back up into your executive functioning. And so the thing that I love to do the most is when you notice that you're there, first, have a ton of compassion for yourself. Just have a ton of compassion for yourself in the moment. You know what? Okay, I'm really worried that this is all going to fail and nobody's ever going to hire me again. And I'm going to be broke living in a van down by the river. Have a ton of compassion. You know what? Like, it's normal to have fears like this. It doesn't mean that anything's wrong with me. And when you're doing that, that's a great time to tap into that box breathing, because when you're doing that breathing in, 4 counts in, 4 counts out, that's what's going to start to slow down your system so that you can start to have some space. So you can go from back here, fear brain, up here to executive functioning. So I would say step 1, breathe just a ton. And then I have a kind of a 4-step framework that when you're in the moment, when I'm in the moment, has helped me, especially as like I start to realize, okay, you know what? I am all caught up in my anxiety. I need to slow down. I need to breathe. And it's this, you know what? I just need to notice it. And that's what I just taught you right now. Just notice it. You know what? I've got some really trashy, expensive thoughts going on. I just noticed that I'm feeling a lot of anxiety. And just noticing that, I'm really nervous about sharing my idea, and just noticing it without judging yourself and having a ton of compassion is step 1. And then I want you to name it. You know what? I think this is my imposter monster. Yep, this is probably imposter syndrome. And just giving it a name sometimes, I think, is just really helpful, because when you can kind of name the monster, it's not so scary. And then I just want you to normalize it. In fact, here's a statistic that has been found by so much research with imposter syndrome. 70% of people feel imposter syndrome. Movie stars feel imposter syndrome. Some of our favorite authors like Brene Brown have said they feel imposter syndrome. Michelle Obama's felt imposter syndrome. Some like Lady Gaga, our favorite musicians, have felt imposter syndrome. So this is normal. It's normal to feel imposter syndrome. And I think sometimes in that moments just to say, you know what, this is imposter syndrome and this is just normal. 70% of people feel this. It means I want to do a good job. It means I'm trying to, do my best. This is normal. And then I want you to reframe it. So notice it, name it, normalize it, reframe it. And a reframe can just be, I'm nervous because I want to do a good job.
Yeah.
Being nervous means that I care about these people, about the outcome, about doing a good job. And my favorite reframe that I use all the time is, this is just what growth feels like. This is what stretching my comfort zone feels like. Yeah. So notice it, name it, normalize it, reframe it. And I try to really do that in the moment. The whole process sometimes can take me maybe about 5 minutes.
Nice. And those are great tips. I one of the things that when you were talking earlier about the expensive thoughts, that is so important. And that really goes hand in hand with the reframing it, right? So when you can see possibilities and consciously start to reframe into a possibility. So if you are nervous, right, you're scared, you're going to get up in front of this audience, or you're going to go approach a new client, what possibly could happen that can go right, not what can go wrong. So your comment about those trash talk that you do, or the expensive thoughts that you're having, that is such a critical component, I think, of, looking at how do you make this a win, right? Because you equally have the potential to be, if you go on stage and do that talk, this could be life-changing in a way that all of a sudden you get all these speaking engagements, or all of a sudden all these clients are coming to you saying, Kelli, I want to work with you. So it's equally as easy to do that as it is to say, oh my God, I'm a fraud, or nobody's going to like what I say. So those are really, really great tips. So any other thoughts on, how I'm going to go to the identification of it, because I think that, you talked about procrastination, fraud. Like, are there any other really small, subtle ways that imposter complex can creep into our psyche?
Yeah. I think, again, I'll go back to, I think sometimes people feel it in their bodies, but they just don't know what it means. Meaning, we already talked about, gosh, I just can't even eat my lunch. I'm going to the bathroom constantly. But even just, some people, if they're really paying attention to their bodies, feel it in their throat. If their throat feels tight, because maybe they want to speak up in a meeting, but they just feel their throat tight, or their shoulders are all like up in their ears. Some people feel it as anxiety or heaviness in their chest. And some people feel it just as a sickness in their stomach. And I don't think that they've ever connected sometimes that like their bodies are talking to them before their minds can make sense of it. In fact, a statistic I'll share with you, neuroscientists have found that our verbal brains process information at about 40 bits per second, which is like pretty amazing. But our nonverbal brains, so this part that makes up like our heart and our gut, processes information at 11 million bits per second. So if anybody, listening here has ever had like this feeling, but you just can't put it into words, like there's no language for it, I think that's how sometimes imposter syndrome starts, is we just feel so heavy and anxious and sick in our bodies, but we just haven't made sense that like, oh, this is imposter syndrome. I need to check what I'm thinking about. I need to take some deep breaths and just kind of slow my system down, And so I always tell people to start by just noticing what's happening in their body. And, when you can notice what's happening in your body, then you can kind of launch into some of the other techniques, the ice water, the breathing, the checking what you're thinking about, those sort of things.
Awesome. Great examples. I'm glad we went back to that, because I think from a consciousness standpoint, sometimes, we know things are happening physically, but we just ignore. We're not listening. And if we can tap into that can certainly help us do that quick shift from the amygdala into that prefrontal cortex. So excellent, really well done. So I'm keeping an eye on our time here, and I want to make sure that we, get time for audience questions. Maybe you could share with the audience, what would be your 2 to 3, however many you can share, sage advice? Like, you've clearly done lots of research, lots of studying around the imposter complex. But what would be those 2 things that you would share with our audience?
Yeah. So the first piece of advice comes from a quote from Michelle Obama. She was talking about imposter syndrome in her book, Becoming, and how she's even felt it. And she said, you know what? She goes, I've sat at almost every powerful table you can think of. I've sat at the UN. I've sat on corporate boards. I've sat on nonprofit boards. She goes, you know what I've realized? They are not that smart. And I would ask all of you listening to reflect. How many times have you put your audience, whether maybe you're interviewing with someone, maybe it's your boss, maybe it's the people around the meeting table, how often have you put them on a pedestal, thinking that they have things all figured out, that they know more than you, that they're more creative than you? And how many times over the course of you just kind of getting comfortable, getting to know them, realized that actually wasn't that true? They don't know more than you. They're not more organized than you. There was no need to put them on a pedestal. And so the number one sage advice that I like to use for myself is to remember that I need to stop overestimating everyone else's intelligence and underestimating my own. And am I putting these people on a pedestal? And I think sometimes just asking yourself that question just helps you slow down and remember that, you know what, nobody has it figured out. 70% of these people sitting around the table probably have imposter syndrome too. They're just like me. We're all humans. It just kind of reminds us of our human condition. I would say the second piece of advice that's really helped me is I think sometimes, and me personally, when I get all up into my imposter syndrome and my imposter monsters taking over, I started to notice like how much I'm just always thinking of myself, my worries, my fears, my anxieties, my screw ups, my this, my. And I think one of the things that's helped me realize is like, oh, there's like other people here in the room. And so asking myself the question, and I just want to kind of land the plane here. I've talked to you about how to work with imposter syndrome with your body. I've talked about how to work with imposter syndrome in your mind, right? With valuable thoughts, not expensive thoughts. And here's how I want you to embrace imposter syndrome in your heart. Is I want you to think about what are 3 things, 3 ways you want your audience to feel when you're in that meeting, when you're doing that presentation. And I think sometimes just that simple switch of like being all up in your own head about how you're feeling and being like, oh, you know what? I want people to feel connected. I want people to feel empowered. I want people to feel like they've been given like practical tips. And so when I can start to shift my focus away from all of my drama and instead start thinking about how do I want this person to feel, or how do I want this audience to feel, it just almost takes all of that ego out of it and puts it into, you know what, how can I actually be connected and helpful? And so that would be my sage advice, is to write down 3 adjectives that describe how you want your audience to feel, and then write that out. If I wanted to share my idea or give this talk or ask for this raise, and I want people to feel, you know, confident, equipped, inspired, this is what I would say, and this is how I would walk in, and this is how I would treat people. So that's what's worked for me anyway.
Wow, I love that. That's awesome. I think that's so, well, it's empowering, number one. And it's so helpful when you get out of your head and you're thinking about the other person, because most people are always thinking about other people, right? And so that is a really powerful tip. And, you know, just something I want to add to that, because as you were saying it, the thought that came to my head is if you're in a meeting or you're speaking or whatever, there's probably somebody else in the room who wants to ask the same question. And so you're giving permission, like, speak up, say this, like, ask the question. That's such an important aspect of, you know, just solidifying yourself as well. Right.
I wholeheartedly agree. So you said I was an author. My book that I'm writing is called The Clarity Effect. And that is the whole premise, is that when you have the courage to show up, own who you are, and be unapologetically clear about it and what you want, like, you really inspire other women to do the same and other people to do the same. And I think, you know, if you're listening, I would encourage you to reflect on who is someone who has had the courage to show up unapologetically, own their talents, ask for what they need, speak their idea, and has that encourage you, or at least cause you to think, you know what, I'm so glad he or she said that. And wow, that really inspires me to show up in that way too.
Exactly. Awesome. Great sage advice. Thank you, Kelli.
Thank you.
So let's open it up to our audience and see what questions they might have. If you want to turn on your video, you're more than welcome to. You don't have to if you're not comfortable, but you can turn your microphones off or the mute off so that you can ask questions. Or if you would rather put them in the chat, please do so. But we're fortunate we have Kelli Thompson here with us today talking about imposter complex, and somebody has to jump off for another call or another meeting. But if you have questions, you know, please jump in. This is a great time to ask those questions and practice some of that courageous conversation. So feel free. Any takers today? Everybody's going to be quiet. Sid, did you have a question?
I'm thinking.
You're thinking, okay.
Okay, I do. Okay, so recently I was interviewing for a job, and I actually reached out to the country manager for this particular company because he posted a role. And anyway, it's interview 6, and the last one, is the presentation. Now, Vicky, you know me well, I don't have an issue speaking up or whatnot. However, when it comes to the spotlight and all eyes on me, I have a fear of public speaking. So I don't understand how and why, considering I'm a very extrovert person. But anyway, I did a lot of planning for this presentation. I knew my topic inside out with my eyes closed. And then when I'm on the presentation and I know the person also, I'm literally like, I have butterflies in my stomach. It almost feels like a first date, which I wouldn't even know what that's like, but.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But anyway, so I did really well, but it's always that way. It's always like, I know my stuff, I'm comfortable, I know the audience. But why is it I'm always so, because I'm second guessing. I'm like, oh my God, am I good enough? Am I saying it right? Am I saying the right words? Am I speaking at the right rate? Or, am I saying the right things? Are other people questioning what I'm saying? And it's like, I need to get that out of my head, but how do I do it? Because all the time, it's just a constant struggle.
So how do you feel when you struggle with that? When you're standing there in the moment and you're telling yourself, stop it, stop it, stop it, don't do this, don't do this.
Horrible.
Horrible.
It's horrible.
Here's what I would offer you. Stop struggling with it. It is,
okay.
I have been a corporate trainer for over 10 years of my career. I've been a keynote speaker for 5 years of my career. And here's what I'll tell you. That's how I feel every time. That's how I felt this morning before I turned on my camera and talked with all of you. And so I think sometimes people think that people who have decades of corporate training and keynote experience don't feel that way. And that when you're feeling that way, there's something wrong with you. And what I want you to know is that there's nothing wrong with you. I still feel that way. I still felt that way this morning where I was like, oh, geez, what if Vicky asks me a question and I blubber like an idiot? I mean, And so step one, just don't wrestle with it. Just notice it. Like, you know what? I'm feeling butterflies and this is normal. This is normal. Do your name it, normalize it, reframe it. The other thing that I will tell you, and one little trick that I've learned, I don't remember which psychologist said this, but he says, sometimes you have to act into new ways of thinking. And what he means by that is the actions of confidence come first and the feelings of confidence come later. Let me ask you this. Did you say that at the end you felt really good?
I was glad it was done over with.
Yeah. At what point in the presentation did you feel like you started to settle down a little bit?
Was when he was complimenting me because I had to pick a topic. And the whole purpose of the presentation was, by then he already knew whether I was qualified or not. It was just more of he wanted to see my presentation skills and my communication skills.
Good for
and
you.
So it was more around the fact that when he started commenting on, wow, Sid, well, I've learned a bunch of things about that topic and it's what we sell. So then I'm like, okay, he's just BSing me. But then I'm like, no, he wouldn't. I know him. So when he started complimenting, that made me feel good. But I'm like, well, that still doesn't mean I have a job.
Yeah. Whole other scenario. I'm gonna give you guys a secret. When I have to get up and do a keynote presentation, which is typically about 45 minutes, I'm thinking of some of these are to audiences of 700,000 people. I actually don't memorize the entire presentation because, in fact, I found that memorizing makes me more anxious because I feel the need to hit every word perfectly, which just is not reality. And so instead, one of the things I found more helpful based on the neuroscience is that I actually only memorize my first 3 minutes. Because they say that the actions of confidence come first. So when I get up on stage and I can memorize a good opener, I can memorize, my first 3 minutes, all of a sudden your adrenaline starts to take over. And then the feelings of confidence come second. So I'm not saying this is a fake it till you make it at all. It's just that it's okay if you don't feel 100% confident and calm and all of these things. It's actually more likely that you won't ever. And I still don't ever. And you can still show up and deliver a great presentation while also feeling nervous, while also feeling imposter syndrome, while also feeling, ooh. So maybe try memorizing the first 2 or 3 minutes and just letting your adrenaline take over, knowing that you feeling that way, it's totally normal. I still feel that way. And I'll feel that way probably for the rest of my life every time I get up on stage.
I think the other thing too, Sid, sorry, I'm just going to add to that, Kelli, because I love what you said there. But the other thing too is to trust yourself. Trust that you know, and that what they're supposed to get, they will get from the conversation. Right? Because, and Kelli and I were talking about this before you guys all joined us, that, you know, people can hear the same thing from different people, but at some point it will resonate. And so they will get it when they're supposed to get it. Right. And so it's just trusting yourself and trusting that you're able to accomplish that.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you, ladies.
Great question. Thank you.
Amazing. Thank you.
Any other questions from our audience today? Erica?
I'll hop in if that's okay. Yeah.
Yeah,
I am right now struggling with, I would call it up leveling in what I'm delivering in my business. I run my own business, and coming up with a new product or service offering. And like, I think my problem is I'm really passionate about this part of my business, like this product line. And so I often feel like I'm preaching when I start talking to people, as opposed to engaging in conversation or whatnot. And so for that reason, maybe I don't get the feedback that I'm looking for. I don't know if you have any ideas around, and I mean, obviously I'm still working it out in my head and my heart. You know, how much to charge for this, and what it exactly looks like. But it is. I mean, I hear it in my head every day. You know, like, do I really want to do this? Like, all that stuff, right? And I think about, okay, what's the ROI for the people that I might be helping and all this kind of stuff. But it's all theoretical, right? Any tips on how to work with that? Like, I can
for sure.
I can talk myself off the ledge, but
do you mind if I coach you just a smidge to find that answer?
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Okay. So you said that you feel like you're a little bit preachy, and you said you're having a lot of doubts about the pricing and the ROI. What is the talk track that's in your head? What's the expensive thought?
You mean the what did you call it? Like the bad thoughts in my head? That's kind of you know, is it really, nobody's going to pay for that? Is it really?
Oh, there it is. Nobody's going to pay for that. So when you're thinking the thought, nobody's going to pay for that.
Actually,
by the way,
let me
go ahead.
Let me just refine that a bit. So I work with a lot with solopreneurs and smaller, like micro businesses, right? And I do that on purpose. I love working with them. I can see that, you know, a 7-figure business they have no problem paying for this. They would be happy if I did it for them, and they, you know, like, it would be a deal for them. Where my doubt comes in is where, you know, the ones that are maybe 6-figure, and maybe it's not their biggest pain point, or maybe it doesn't have that much of an impact, all that stuff. All
right, so that'll be the thing. So when you're thinking with that context, nobody's going to pay for that, how do you feel?
Well, it's a great excuse.
Right.
To step back. Yeah.
Absolutely. Do you feel doubt?
Yeah, at this point, honestly, it feels so rehearsed that I know exactly what it is. I know, like, I'm having trouble breaking through and just getting excited about it and just running with it. Right? Like, I'm constantly just holding myself back.
Got it. So what's causing the preaching? Because I have a hunch, I'll just throw it out there, that you have this thought that says nobody's going to pay for that. So then you might take a step back, you might play a little small. And because there's like this source of self-doubt happening, then you preach about the product. Because I used to be in sales and still am in sales. But sometimes when I'm doubtful, I just like vomit and preach.
Yeah.
Tell me where I'm wrong.
Yeah, no, I have started to realize that I think that's the connection, right? And Vicki, you know me, like I'm pretty quiet. I will sit back. I am the person that will sit in the room if I'm with, a group of whatever, 7 people that I don't really know well. I'll just sit and take it all in and process it. And I might say something, but I'm not, there's no, verbal diarrhea going on at all. But when it comes to this, I find myself just like.
What's the opposite of nobody's going to pay for that?
Oh, well, this would be, really helpful for everybody.
This would be very helpful.
Yeah.
People pay for things that are helpful. Can you find evidence that's true?
Well, the damn thing is I've sold it to people in the past and I've really helped them.
Right.
Why can't I? But like in a different format and obviously at a different price range, right? Like I'm really pushing myself on the price this time and I'm, anyway, I mean, it's interesting, right? Because what we teach other people what we struggle with ourselves, right? And
Totally.
so that's the whole, value to money connection that I struggle with. And this is really what this piece is all about as well.
Imposter syndrome and money they're like cousins. They sleep in the same bed.
Yeah.
So, but think about it just for a minute. If you're sitting around one of those circles and you walk in with this thought of this is helpful and people are going to pay for it, how would you feel? What's like 2 adjectives that describe how you would feel?
Oh, I'd be just grateful to be able to help them, right?
Yeah.
Like it'd be awesome.
And then what would you do?
If
you felt that way, then like what would you do and say?
Well, okay, that's an interesting way to put it, because I probably would kind of hold back more and do more asking questions and finding out how we can help them as opposed to telling them how it's done. Yeah.
That sounds good. Is that something you think you can try? Practicing the thought? Is helpful, people will pay for it?
Yeah, I will do that. Okay.
The last thing I'll say, just to wrap this up, because we could have a whole conversation about this, and I know we're close on time, but stay out of people's pocketbooks.
Sorry, what?
Stay out of people's bank accounts.
Sorry, okay.
Stay out of, don't get into people's bank accounts. You don't know what they have in their bank account, so just stay out of it.
Yeah, right. Don't judge whether they can afford it or not. Yeah.
Trust me, we have no idea. Big, small, or in between. So
yeah.
Thank you for allowing me to coach you.
No, thank you, Kelly.
That was great, Erica. Well done. So we have time for one more question before we wrap up. Are there any others from our audience? Any takers? Emily?
Hi.
Hi.
Hi, Kelly. I just wanted to say about imposter syndrome, because this is something I struggle with a lot, I feel like. But one thing that has helped me, like just for instance, the other day, so I'm a nurse practitioner and I work in a rural critical access hospital and clinic. And so when I first started out, so I'm in charge of the ER. We do have physician backup available by telephone, and sometimes they're available physically, but not always. And, when I first started, I was terrified. Like, what if somebody comes in and is coding, or what if something bad happens to my patient and I'm here and I don't know what to do, or I can't fix the patient. And I just realized, like, it helps me to know that on one hand, yes, it kind of freaks me out, but I know that any good nurse practitioner, doctor, nurse, etc., is always going to have a little bit of that fear or worry about, like, what if something bad happens, because that shows that you care. And so, I mean, whether you're giving a presentation and you're nervous about, like, how am I going to sound? Because, I mean, if you didn't care, then you wouldn't have those feelings, but that's also not the person that you want to be.
Yes. I love that.
So, yeah. So I just think that has helped me. And then I realized, you know what, these doctors that have been doing this for 30 years, they feel the same way that I feel.
Yes. And I've coached doctors, Emily, and I will tell you, they have the same doubts that everyone else does, you know, and I think it's the whole pedestal syndrome thing, thinking that like, oh, the senior medical chief of staff must not ever have doubts. Oh, I promise you.
Exactly.
That's not true.
Exactly.
So thank you.
But anyway, thank you so much.
Thanks for sharing that, Emily. Well, thank you everyone for joining us today. Kelli, again, you're such a delight, and thank you for imparting so much of your experiences and so much of your wisdom respecting, you know, imposter complex. I know you feel the same, but our hopes is that our audience will walk away today with some great tips and, you know, really start to be conscious and practice how to overcome imposter complex. So maybe just a quick recap. One of the things you talked about was naming it, normalizing it. Sorry, what I missed. Naming it, normalizing it.
Notice it, name it, normalize it, reframe it.
There we go. And reframe it. Sorry. That was awesome. Great tips. And just being conscious of that. Kelli, I'm super grateful to you. And I just love everything you shared with us today. So thank you for joining us on Women in Leadership Talk. It was great having you here. And I know you and I will stay in touch as well. So we have a new friendship.
Yeah.
And ladies, I would like to share with you our next podcast will be on July 22nd. We will be speaking with another Kelli, Kelli Windorf. She is the author of Flying Lead Change, and she talks about the importance of the lead mare and how we, you know, move things forward. So if you have an opportunity to join us, you can join us live like we've done today, or you can listen on the go on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, or Google. So thank you again, Kelli, and I will be in touch with you very soon. You've got lots of great feedback in the chat, people thanking you for all the great wisdom that you've shared and how valuable this has been today. So good luck, everyone. Have a wonderful weekend ahead, and we hope to see you on our next podcast. So
thank you so much for having me. Bye. Thanks, everyone.
Bye.